All right, cool. My name is Wayne Conger. I'm Hutz's founder and CEO. Today, we're going to be going over the idea of a hybrid home. And you're going to see we're kind of grappling with this live, trying to define this category of house type or home asset or however we want to describe it, where it's a type of use case we see a lot in our business. It's not exactly a primary home. It's not exactly an investment property. It's not exactly a vacation house. It's some other thing where it's kind of all of those. So a very typical condition for us is somebody gets in touch with Huts and says, hey, I've got a kind of wacky idea for a house. Little do they know that we hear this all the time. And the idea is I rent my apartment in New York or in Chicago or in LA or San Francisco or wherever it might be. I don't want to buy in the city. And instead, I want to get a house that I can go to 1 or 2 weekends a month. I can rent the rest of the time. The rental subsidizes itself and covers the carrying costs. And every once in a while, I can go there for longer stretches because I work from home. I can go there for a few weeks or a month at a time, whenever that might be. And so we kind of hear this so often that we are trying to figure out how to come up with a criteria or a definition for this use case. And to date, we're kind of describing it as a hybrid home. And the reason we can't just call it a primary home or a secondary home or an investment property is really that those are pretty strict terms, both in the tax code and in the bank financing. When you go to get bank financing, you have to check one of those boxes and say, is this your primary home? Is this a vacation home, or is it an investment property? And your rates and the types of financing you can acquire change based on that determination. And in this case, it's kind of all of them. So there's kind of different strategies for how to finance it. And similarly, on the tax side, the way that you're able to depreciate the property or realize the revenue from the property changes based on it being a pure rental property or an investment property or second home or short-term rental. And again, here it's sort of all of those things. And so part of the challenge is to figure out what is the format and design of a house that sort of satisfies all of those conditions. And then how do we start to put terminology around it so that it can be financed and dealt with as an asset in an intelligent way. And so this is an idea we've been kind of grappling with for a while. And we put some early numbers to it a couple of years ago in an essay I wrote called Home Economics and the Rule of 3/4. And what we're getting to here is in this world of hybrid homes, that for it to be a good development, meaning that you're being an intelligent developer trying to stay right side up and make this use case of a place that can cover its own costs, that you can use a quarter of the time, that it's appreciating and it's equity positive and cash flow positive. To hit all of those goals, you really want to work against this rule of 3/4. And the idea being that you shouldn't spend on the project, on the capital expenditure side, any more than 3/4 of the potential resulting value. And so if you are in a market where it could support, say, $1 million resale value, but maybe no more than that, you really shouldn't spend more than $750,000 on the land costs, soft costs, and build costs. That's just being a good developer. And so one of the things that we look at is making sure that if you're building one of these sort of hybrid homes, it's meant to serve these purposes, not to overbuild and not to get sort of upside down on what the market can support. And one way to help ensure that you don't is following this rule of 3/4. The next is 3/4 carrying cost versus revenue. That there's kind of two parts to this. This assumes that you're renting the place 75% of the time. So let's say you're giving it to yourself to use 1 week out of every month, or 12 weeks out of the year. The rest of the time, you're offering it up to rent, either short-term, mid-term rental, whatever your sort of approach is. And so that's it's only available 3/4 out of the year for rent. So your total amount of time to generate revenue from it is 3/4 out of the year, and of that time, and the total revenue that you can generate, your carrying cost should be no more than 3/4 of that. So let's say in that renting it 3 weeks out of every month throughout the year, you're able to generate $50,000, or I'll use sort of simpler numbers for myself. You're able to generate $80,000 in revenue. Your carrying costs on the property between your mortgage, any other additional lending that you might have, your your taxes, your maintenance fees, etc., should be no more than 3/4 of that, which would be $60,000. And that's just making sure that the property is kicking off a little bit of cash, it's cash flow positive, um, and that it's carrying itself effectively. And it's another guardrail to make sure that you're not overspending on this property. Overspending might be okay when you're thinking about a primary home. Some folks kind of their eyes get wide and they think about, well, amortize over the next 30 years. I can be a little bit over expenses now, but a couple of years from now, this is going to look inexpensive. In the world of the hybrid home, it should be immediately that the house is cash flow positive and equity positive, and this rule of 3/4 is a way to get there. So I'd recommend revisiting this essay if you want to read about some of the economic underpinnings and how we think about the hybrid home, and go to huts.com to guides and search for home economics and the rule of 3/4. And this is a lot of our guiding principle on how to make these not just appropriately sized designs, but also smart developments from an asset standpoint. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I first really started describing these sort of projects as hybrid homes, and starting to give more criteria that people might not know that that's what they're imagining. They might say it's kind of like the only house I own, so I think it's my primary home, but I'm going to rent it sometimes, and sort of struggling to figure out what it is. But if it hits these criteria that it's it's considered owner occupied, even if you let it out to somebody, yet flexible, it's probably a hybrid home. If it's designed to give you some work from home capability or work from anywhere capability, that maybe there's an office space there, the kind of thing that maybe wouldn't be in a pure investment property. You wouldn't give over like half of the bedrooms or half of a bedroom space to a work from home setup, but in this case, you probably would. It's probably a hybrid home. We deal largely in kind of rural settings, and so that's likely one of the criteria for a hybrid home for us. That it's designed to create a supplemental income stream, and that it can cover its costs with not full-time rental, but partial time rental. If it hits all of those modes, it's likely a hybrid home. So I wanted to go through 3 projects that we're wrapping up right now that all fit into this category of hybrid home, and just some of the numbers breakdown for each. The first is a project called the Break House. This is for a client that lives full time in Brooklyn, but we help them source a parcel in the Western Catskills and design a home that thematically works for their lifestyle. They're really big on the Nordic cycle and cold plunges and sauna and wellness, and the house has a lot of those amenities kind of baked into the structure of them. So it's great for them, but that's also becomes the selling point on the rental side as well. And so one of the things that we looked at is how to not overbuild this house, and not only create demand through the design and amenities, but also make sure that the carrying costs don't get excessive, where they might get pushed into a spot where they feel like they need to rent it all the time or maximize the rental income, and as such, removing their ability to use it on their own. That sort of like undercuts the whole idea of a hybrid house and makes it just a pure rental. Also fine, but not really this. So we're really looking at square footage and sizing and carrying costs and trying to make design to what those resulting carrying costs would be and make sure that they are 75% or less of what we think the revenue projections could be. And so here you see the some images of the completed home. It's a really great kind of wellness spa-like space that our clients use on select weekends. Sometimes they'll go for a week at a time. Occasionally, they'll build up some of the rental and let it be used for a couple months at a time, and then they'll go there for a month because they can work from home. They don't necessarily need to be in New York all the time, and they can make this home for when they're there, and then while they're there, they have a dedicated place to work. And when they're not there, that workspace is able to easily convert into an additional bedroom and open up their rental possibilities. And here you see a really great custom sauna back in the forest. Again, finding these sort of moments that are appropriate for their lifestyle, but are also create demand as a type of theme for a renter. So if you're really into wellness, sauna, yoga shalas, things like that, then the break house is for you. And it is also the thing that were the design criteria for our clients. The next is the trail house, which is actually right up the road from the break house. They are almost neighbors, about a mile away. And here, same story, almost identical condition. Our clients live full time in a different neighborhood in Brooklyn, and they wanted a place that would be their primary store of equity, their only house that they own. But in their case, it was as much about the land as it was about the house. They're really into dirt biking, and they wanted a place where they could have trails to navigate. And so the garage is a big piece of the project, along with a small modified medium bar. And similarly, we kept the guardrails quite tight on what we thought that they should spend while their ambitions grew throughout design, which happens in almost every project. We're able to kind of come back to the pro forma and the economics of the project and say, to make this work, we really want to follow this rule of 3/4. And so we're able to set those projections of what we think revenue will look like, and then multiply it by 0.75 and say, this is how much we should be spending on this. And that helped us create a really efficient footprint that serves their clients' purposes and is going to perform really well in the rental market as well. House here is a modified medium bar with living, kitchen, dining space with full height, full staircase up to a loft with office space, playroom, and upstairs bedroom, and then a ground floor primary suite. And you can see how it's arranged around this large entry court that allows, honestly, they're trucks, flatbed trucks with dirt bikes to come in and unload in the garage. And they have this kind of like mini compound set up on the property, but made up of very modest buildings, all things considered. And here we are in the real home. We're waiting on final images here, but you can see some of the under construction images from the day they got their certificate of occupancy last month. Some of the project under construction. So this is a place that, because they rent full time, they're able to finance this as their primary home, which means it's a lower interest rate, all told, than you would get on a second home or an investment property. So that's really helpful. They can depreciate it in the way at the same rate that you would a primary home, which is also quite helpful. And they can also afford it in the way that a property in New York City or in Brooklyn might be completely unaffordable to this buyer. This is a place that they could build on their own, operate as a developer, remove a lot of the profit and overhead that you would normally pay for a developer because they're doing it on their own, and take advantage of all of the financing options that come from doing your own construction and from it being a primary home, but change the use where they can also then rent it and have it drive revenue. And then the last is this project, which we call it Endless Meadow House, which is just wrapping up now in Hobart, New York, in Delaware County, in the kind of far northwest Catskills. And here it's an interesting spot, less of a mature rental market, so we're kind of setting the market in some ways, and had to look kind of further away for comps on what the rental revenue might be. But our bet here is that the place is so beautiful, which it is, and surrounded by thousands of acres of forever wildland, that it's going to be more like a destination property and less like something that you're comparing to the neighbor and saying, oh, you need to rent this or rent that. Here, it's sort of, I'm going here specifically to hang out in this beautiful landscape. And so we're kind of expecting great numbers on the rental side. But still, we urge our clients to be quite conservative on the amount that they spend and what their carrying costs could be, and not get and to be conservative on what their rental projections might be. And so that helped us tighten up the house a little bit and say, all right, well, it's really going to be our small L, which is a 2-bed, 2-bath, under 1,400 square feet, efficient footprint. And while the lot could support a larger project and the client also likely could afford a larger project, I think for the use case, that the development thesis or concept that they had of a hybrid home that they could use sometimes, that they could rent and have it cover its costs, and it would be a equity and cash flow positive asset, that forced us to think a little bit smaller around what the size of this place could be. And one of the things that we found on the rental side is there really is this nice size of property, 2-bed, 1-bath, 2-bed, 2-bath, that opens up a lot of potential rental scenarios. So I always use the use case of my family, where it's me, my wife, we have 3 kids, and often my mother-in-law is in tow with us. So when it's everyone, it's a group of 6. And so looking at this house and this layout, we would be able to rent this place with our group of 6, and be quite comfortable, not feel like we've completely under rented the size of property, that we're not completely packed on top of each other. And so that opens up kind of larger family. But then all the way down to just me and my wife going, I could imagine us renting a place like this for a week and working from there, and us having a little bit of separation of space and not feel like we're knocking around in a big giant house, or that we have over rented the size of property. And so I think one of the things that you see in the Trail House, the Break House, and the Endless Meadow House, that they're sort of appropriately scaled for all of those different scenarios, which is opening up the rental possibilities of the property, and at the same time governing the square footage and ultimately the construction costs and carrying costs of the property, which makes those economics that we're laying out in the rule of 3/4 really work. And so those are 3 projects, and this is the kind of math that we do early on in a project like this, even really before we put pen to paper on the design side. We work backwards from equity projections, from revenue projections, comps in the area, and what is the market we're looking to fill. If we know that this hybrid home approach is the development thesis for our clients. And so, we would have it organized by phase, looking at if there's a project we're working on where there's a couple of structures. There's an ADU unit, which is going to be phase 1. There's a primary home and guest suite, which is phase 2. We have our rental projections from other well done um, well done short-term rental properties in the area. This is in Greene County, kind of near Hunter Mountain or Windham Mountain, if anyone's familiar with that area. And we're looking at the primary home comps, looking at ADU and kind of smaller unit comps. And out of that, we're able to say, well, here's our kind of big projection on the revenue side, and looking at how does it annualize, assuming that you're only getting 60% occupancy throughout the year, trying to take the most conservative view, and then saying, let's not spend more than 3/4 of that. And that's going to be the way that we give ourselves kind of pricing targets and design criteria to make sure that we're not over designing and moving towards a construction project that doesn't pencil out. So let me stop there. I've got a few minutes. I'm going to make this a half-hour webinar, so I'll open it up for 5 minutes for Q&A. And so for any questions that you have about our approach to hybrid homes or our thinking on how these work, please just type them in the chat, in the chat bubbles, and I'll do my best to try and field them. Okay. Little bit of a shy group today, no problem. If that's the case, I'm gonna take it as a compliment. I've answered a lot of questions here, and I'll going once, going twice, going 3 times on questions, and I'll close it out. So this will be recorded and on our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/Hudson NYC. And you can check out how we do hybrid homes and any number of other housing types that we're working on there. And thank you so much for joining.